Hi, I'm Phil Cooke, and if you've ever wondered about Joel Osteen's media ministry, this is the episode for you. I'm going to be interviewing Jon Swearingen. Joel's producer is longtime director and producer of his television program. I've known Jon since he was in college and been along with him every step of the way. We've been friends for a very long time, and I wanted to get in and find out, okay, how do they shoot the program? How do they create the program? The impact it's had? Real practical stuff about how to create a media ministry, particularly on the scale of Jon's. So if you're interested in media ministry at all, particularly when it comes to television, this is the episode for you. So stay tuned. Jon Swearingen, I'm thrilled to have you here. We go back to your college days. We've known each other for a really long time, and I'm thrilled to have you on the podcast. What's your official title at Lakewood Church?
Senior Director of Broadcast Media is my official title.
Which means you run the Joel Osteen television ministry, essentially, right?
The broadcast side of it, yeah.
The broadcast side of it.
Yeah, there you go, television. Yeah.
Close enough. So go back to college, your college days. How did you get involved in TV to begin with?
Well, I went to Oral Roberts University and I was going to study television and ended up getting a job at Oral Roberts Television and met this guy named Phil Cooke, who changed my life forever. And from there, I was a student and I worked on the broadcast. And then after I graduated, I was hired and I stayed there for 3 years until, again, this Phil Cooke guy got me my job down at Lakewood Church because he used to do some work for Joel Osteen back when he worked for his dad, Joel's dad. And I would go down, tag along from time to time. And finally, one day, Phil said, "Why don't you hire Jon?" And, that was in 1991, believe it or not.
Woo, man.
30 years ago.
It's interesting because a lot of people who are listening to this or watching don't really know that Joel was the director and producer of his dad's television ministry, Jon Osteen, who was a great guy. And back when I was directing Oral Roberts' program, which was the number one Christian program at the time in the country, Joel would ask me to come down to help with some special events they would do. We did a live national TV special primetime event one night, and I would go in and direct those for him. And when it came time to do a new show, Open, he'd ask me to come down and direct that, we'd come up with a concept. And we've done commercials together over the years and done a ton of shows. And you're right, you started coming along as a camera operator and running camera. And then you met Joel, he really connected with you. And so it was just a natural fit when he decided he was going to move more into a producing role and wanted somebody to direct the program. You were pretty much a natural fit.
Yeah. And he directed his dad's shows, all of them. I just ran camera and then edited. So he was always directing and oversaw the editing, of course. But yeah, he was constantly involved in his dad's program.
And you were there, of course, when his dad passed away, and we went through that, what was it, about a 9-month period, not sure what they were going to do at the church, and then Joel emerged as the pastor?
Exactly. It was pretty early on. It became obvious that Joel was the one because the people just loved him, and they supported him, and, they did it at first because to honor his dad, but then they realized this guy's got it, so it became apparent. And then his dad passed away in January. In October of that year, he was made officially the pastor of the church. And
somebody had to step into that directing role.
Exactly. Somebody stepped into that directing role, and it happened to be me. So here we are.
Well, it's funny you say about how much the people love Joel. I remember filming with you were probably there. Jeff Steinborn was the director of photography. We shot back in those days 35 millimeter film for a lot of the stuff. And I remember we were doing something in the service one Sunday, and we actually had Jon. We asked Jon if we could have permission to get a shot of him looking at the camera with the entire congregation behind him. At that point, I think Lakewood was running about 6,000 members. And so Jeff and I are up there setting the camera, getting ready for Jon to he was going to do something. I forget, it was a promo for something. And something wasn't working right. So Joel walked up on stage, and I just remember the minute he stepped up on stage. Now, he'd just been a producer, director. He'd not spoken at the church before. He's never been really in the limelight in any way. But the minute he stepped up on the stage, the place went crazy. They broke out in applause. They were whooping and hollering for him. And I remember pausing in the chaos of that moment, just pausing and thinking, okay, there's something unusual here. There's something really different. And I remember all the way back, and that was years before he took over and as pastor, and that was kind of an interesting thing. So over the years, the interesting thing about what you've done is during the time you went from the Jon Osteen to Joel as pastor. You also went from the old Lakewood building to the Compact Center, the new Lakewood Church. Those are some pretty, and for those of you who don't know that are listening, the Compact Center was the arena in downtown Houston where the Houston Rockets played basketball. I think y'all turned it into 18,000 seat church, but it was bigger than that. There was more seats. I think you took some out, right, when you redesigned it for a church.
Well, it depends. For a basketball game, yeah, it would have been less seats, but for a concert, it may.
Oh, that's right, because you have people on the floor. That's a good point.
Exactly. So you could argue both ways.
But that was a massive thing, and you brought in some major league talent, lighting directors, set designers, people like that. What was it like working with those guys?
It was really kind of, I felt like it was way out of my league, when you realize that it wasn't, in the moment, we didn't realize the monumental task we were doing, but when it was kind of almost finished and you look back and realize we were making a 16,000 seat television studio, basically, that was also a church, not to discount that by any means, but we needed those experts. We needed the people that had done some set designs for television specials and award shows and the Olympics. And we needed people who had done lighting for television shows and so forth. It was a big deal. I mean, we couldn't have done it on our own by any means. We had to have outside help. I
remember it was a huge, huge thing. So tell me about the legend. There's this legend out there that Joel will preach on Sunday, and he used to go up as soon as it was over. They could bring him a sandwich, and he would edit his own sermon. Is that true? Does he still do it? What's the story there?
Yeah, it's true. What he does is when he finishes preaching, I'll do almost a full pass, sometimes a full pass of the edit. I'll just go through it real quick, and then he'll come in and sit with me, and we'll watch the entire sermon. And he'll make suggestions of, I think I said that better at 8:30. So we'll pull a clip or two from the 8:30, the earlier service, and put it in for the broadcast, or we may cut something out. So yeah, he does definitely. He's still very involved in all of the editing of his programs. Now, once that's finished, we take it and we insert, the closed captioning and all the other lower thirds and so forth. But even then, he's involved in how the lower thirds look and, the content of what the wording and so forth. So,
and I remember in the very first number of years of that, he was running the edit console.
He was. That's exactly right. He definitely, when it was linear, when it was tape to tape.
That's right. Well, that brings up an interesting point, and that is not very many media directors or producers at churches or ministry organizations get to work with a pastor or leader who was once a producer himself. That's a whole different dynamic because Joel gets exactly what you're talking about. He understands it. He has ideas. Tell me about your working relationship over the years. How has that evolved?
I think that's a great way to say it. It is a unique thing about Lakewood and Joel Osteen is that for years, I think 13 years, he built his dad's television program and he was good at it. He had same guy that taught you, Matt Connolly.
Yeah.
He taught him how to direct, and he basically came and lived at the church, and they paid him to teach Joel. And so, which you taught me how to do it. So when I stepped into his role, it was a very seamless thing because we came from the same philosophy. But having someone on stage and who's kind of the executive producer that knows broadcast and knows production, it's a great thing for guys like me because we speak the same language. Plus, we worked together behind the scenes for 7 years with his dad's show. So I could tell when he's on stage and he'll look at something and say, something's wrong. Let's figure out there's a light that's wrong or something's going on. I can read him well enough to know kind of what's going on. So that's a unique thing and a very cool thing too.
That's neat. And for people that don't know, I was working on the crew as a student when I was at Oral Roberts University many years ago, and Oral was doing primetime TV specials, and he brought in a guy named Matt Connolly he was out of Boston, but he directed a ton of Hollywood stuff and a lot of sports, a lot of big event things. And I ended up being an assistant director to Matt, learning how to do television, multi-camera TV, and worked with Matt for a number of years. And then I took over. Matt left. I took over the show. And when Matt left, he went to Lakewood and started working with Joel, and he taught Joel. So Matt taught me, then he taught Joel, then you came up working with me, and then you eventually went to work with Joel. So you're exactly right. There's a certain philosophy, I guess, about directing that is consistent through all those years. It's been really kind of seamless, I guess, at Lakewood, right?
Yeah, it was. And I was happy about that. And, watching Joel, I ran camera for Joel for many, many years, and it was just natural. I knew not exactly, but I knew pretty well what he was going to do, the shots he was going to take, the framing he wanted, and so forth. So, yeah, it was seamless.
So what would you say to, I get a lot of media directors that tell me, my pastor never has time for me. He doesn't want to spend any time or work with me or talk to me about the program or the video outreach of the church or whatever we do. What would you encourage? How would you encourage media directors out there that maybe don't have that kind of long time personal relationship that you and Joel have? How would you encourage them to get more on the pastor's wavelength?
That's a good point. I think you've got to find a way to connect. I always felt like my job as the director of media was to fulfill Joel's vision. I mean, he has a calling and a vision that he wants to do, and it's not my calling. I feel like that my job is to further that for him and to tell his story, if you will. And so I think you got to get what you get, you know what I mean? I think you got to find a way to connect with the pastor and let him know or her know that you're on their side, that you're there to further what they want to do, not what you want to do.
That's good. And I often tell people, if you're a media guy, stop talking about light levels, stop talking about focal length, stop talking about technical stuff, because most pastors, unlike Joel, most pastors don't get that. They're thinking in terms of mission and evangelism and outreach and things like that. And you start speaking their language, they're more likely to connect with you. I think that's a big key.
Model numbers. Who cares about the model numbers? Let your equipment be something that furthers what you're doing, not hinders what you're doing. Because I know that when I first came to Lakewood, they had Joel Osteen, the Jon Osteen program was a fantastic show. And when I saw their switcher and some of this equipment they were using, this is not the latest and greatest gear, but it was how he found a way to use it. That was great. He just always believed in quality and always believed to do the best you can with what you've got.
That's really good. Now, over the years, it's not just been a show in a 18,000 seat TV studio church. You've filmed everywhere. I mean, Yankee Stadium, the Staples Center in LA, because you started doing the Nights of Hope with Joel a number of years ago, and you've filmed all over the country. I mean, tell us a little bit about the wide range of stuff that you do. Most people just see the Sunday morning weekly program, and they don't recognize or realize all the stuff you've filmed all over the world with Joel. Tell us a little bit about the different challenges you've had over the years.
Yeah, I think the stadium events, baseball stadium events, have definitely been the most challenging. We did Yankee Stadium, I think in 2000, whatever year it was, the first year they opened the new Yankee Stadium. We were the first non-baseball event there.
Oh wow!
So it was challenging, and that was one of the first Major League Baseball stadiums we had done, and I was way over my head there. We ended up going back a few years later, and it was so much easier because I knew much more about where the camera placement should be. I think we had something like 14 cameras that first year. And as a director, I just forgot that there's all these other 3 cameras I haven't even looked at yet. And I felt guilty that we paid the money to have them in operators. And then you're right. Madison Square Garden is a challenge in itself, just the load in and load out and the restrictions and so forth. We've done a lot of events here in this building, in our current building, and it's so much easier because I know, where the camera spigots are. I know the good camera angles. I know the stage and so forth. So it's a challenge when you go someplace else, and you've got to immerse yourself. And pre-planning is so important, and getting the right people. Like I learned early on to hire a production manager to handle the logistics of what time the crew should be there and so forth. And that's something I don't need here, but on location, I did need that. And one thing I would say, if you're able to at all, try to specialize, try to get people that don't try to do too much. I used to TD myself, and I didn't have an AD. And I had a guy one time tell me, "Why are you doing that? You're wasting your energy and your focus on which button to push. You should be worried about what's going on the screen." And it really made me realize. So now there's an AD, there's a TD, there's a bunch of other people in the control room that's taking a lot of the burden off of the director. So that's one advice that I would say, if you're able to, and you've got, most of the time you have volunteers who are eager and willing to get in there and do it. And it's a great stepping stone to have an AD that will eventually become a director that you can use, a backup director. And
Well,
same thing with the TD.
Let's expand on that for a minute, because I've been in meeting after meeting after meeting with churches and ministry organizations that do television that are absolutely convinced you have to pay top dollar local people to come in and run camera and be the AD or technical director or whatever. But you've done a really masterful job of raising up volunteers. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think we have about 50 or so volunteers that work in media. And not all of them are volunteers, but a lot of them are. And what I've found is they want a place to serve for and do excellence. They want to feel like they're contributing to the church, the ministry, the thing that they're a part of. And so it's a natural thing to bring them on and train them, and then expect them to rise to a certain level. They will rise to the level that you expect them to be at. So like I said, the TD is a great place. Somebody that punches the switcher buttons. Get them in there and let them learn on their own, or teach them, give them the books and let them learn what each button on the switcher does. An AD. So they're not going to get it right every time. It's okay, but they'll learn from that, and it'll be better for you as well.
Well, and also I think you have to have a commitment as a staff leader. You have to have a commitment to put in the time with these guys to teach and train them. I find that a lot of churches and ministries, they're just not interested in taking the time to train people. But if they are, think of the money you save. I mean, you got 50 people on your team, mostly volunteers. How much money are you saving every week simply because they're volunteers? And like you say, they want to contribute. They want to help. But you have to find them and work with them. Yeah,
you do. And you've got to let them know you appreciate them and use them when they're there to volunteer. And they show up, they get dressed, and they get there early. If you don't use them one week, well, okay, I'll come back the next week. If you don't use them that week, or if you just have them go get coffee, it's going to discourage them down the road.
Yeah.
Hey, I want you to do this. And if they mess up, they mess up. It's give them a place to experience the church and be a part of it. Same as you would in the nursery or somewhere else.
Yeah, I think that's really good. So let's say move on from that to workflow issues at Lakewood. So how many cameras do you typically run on a Sunday at church?
We have 8 cameras, 9 camera heads, but 8 cameras plugged in at a time, if that makes sense.
And if I recall, you're running 2 jibs?
We have 3 jibs.
3?
2 centerline cameras, 1 handheld, and then during the music, there's 2 steady cams.
Okay. And you don't use the music in your television program, but you'll still shoot it as if you were.
Right, because it's still live streamed, and the live stream numbers are, pretty big, and it's a very easy thing for us to do. So even though the broadcast is a half-hour show of Joel's message, the entire service is still streamed and put on demand.
Speaking of the live stream, when churches were shut down back in 2020, 21, were you shooting on the stage with no audience? Were you shooting in Joel's home, or did you go to a studio? How did you do the live stream shows when nobody was allowed to be in the audience?
We shot in the auditorium. We just repositioned some of the cameras and just did not show any of the empty seats. So there was no audience, but we went ahead and shot on the stage. Workflow
wise, you shoot the show on a Sunday. What happens to it? How do you process the show in the following week or 2 weeks? What kind of schedule are you on?
What we record on a Sunday typically airs 3 weeks later. So on Sunday it's recorded. There's some editing that takes place on Sunday. Monday, the audio gets sweetened. Graphics get inserted, and any little fixes we make within the broadcast as far as audio and or video. And then graphics are laid in, and closed captioning has to be done, because now as of several years ago, the closed captioning cannot cover any graphic content. So that graphic content obviously has to be put in. So the workflow is, it usually ships out early the next week because the stations want it about 6 days in advance to make sure that we don't say anything controversial that they want to pull.
So you're typically a week from shipping after you taped and 3 weeks from airing.
From airing, typically, yeah.
Okay. Now, when it comes to closed captioning, are you doing that in-house or do you farm that out?
We farm it out now. We used to not, but it just became economical to farm it out.
Yeah, that's probably a smart move. And how many editors do you have that are working on the show during the week? After Joel, of course, and you and Joel finish tweaking. How many editors do you have working on the show?
There's 3 different editors, and we do different versions depending on the market. Like if we air on TBN, it's a 27-minute final product that we send them. Most of the stations get a 28:30, and some stations get a 29-minute. So we have to vary our closes and based upon the length, the variety of the show. We used to do different versions of phone numbers, but we stopped doing that. Thank goodness.
Let's look at the bigger picture for a minute. You obviously have to work with a social media team, with a web team, people doing stuff that supplements the program. How often do you meet with them? How do you keep things thematic? If Joel preaches on forgiveness one Sunday, how do you keep that thematic throughout the social media? Are you communicating with them, or how do you work with a bigger communications team, as it were?
Yeah, there's good communication between all of us. When Joel writes his own sermons, he types them all out and pretty much memorizes them. So he will send out a transcript or his script to both the social media team and the media team, and probably a couple others as well. And so they're able to get the same content we are. And anything we record, our social media team has access to as well on the SAN. So they'll go ahead and pull clips that will then correlate when the broadcast airs a few weeks later. Equipment-wise,
how often do you update your gear? I love that you said a minute ago, it's not always about having the best equipment and the most state-of-the-art stuff. It's finding what's right for what you're trying to do. I think that's kind of important. You've been a good model of that. Do you? In today's digital world, do we have to update more than you used to? How have things changed?
Well, one of the things, we've got 2 engineers, one senior engineer, and his role, or their role, is the engineering department, is to make sure that our computers, all of our editors, and the SAN all work together. So an editor does not update the latest version of software on their computer. That's the engineering department that does that. So they predetermine, I don't know if they do it once a year. Sometimes it's once a year, sometimes it's 6 months, or sometimes it's maybe every other month kind of thing. But it's up to them, because ultimately each room needs to be able to talk to each other. And so it's counterintuitive. It's counterproductive rather for one editor to update to the new version of software and the rest of the team hasn't. So then all of a sudden everything he does won't work with anyone else. So it's a coordinated effort. So does that answer your question? So it's kind of
just always curious about that. I have a lot of people that will come to me and say, well, how does Lakewood do it? So I'm always curious about, what your way of doing it. And one of the things that I always encourage people with, you're easily the most viewed Christian inspirational program in the world. Your show is everywhere. And if you're a smaller church and you're just launching on television locally, you can't necessarily copy everything you do, but I think the bigger principles do apply. I think, there's so much we can learn from how you do things, how you deal with volunteers, where you put the cameras, the fact that you're really careful about running an eye level close up with Joel. I worked with a church recently that they shoot the pastor in a wide shot all the time. They never go in beyond a knee shot. And I was trying to say, hey, the emotion and the power is all right here. If when he gets into a real ministry moment, you don't want to be in a wide shot. And so one of the things I'll say is, I think your era coming up and learning was probably the last of the era where multi-camera television was really common. And I think people after you grew up with YouTube And so they became masters of a single camera. But when it came to multiple cameras, there wasn't much going on as much in Hollywood, except maybe in news divisions or the occasional award show with multiple cameras like there were when I was coming up. There was sitcoms doing multiple camera work. There was TV specials were the number one show on TV. And so I think today we're seeing a renaissance with churches of using multiple cameras, but there's not a lot of sources out there to teach people how to do it. So I don't know, any tips that you would tell multi-camera directors that are young and starting out? What would you share with them about what are the real priorities they need to think about?
There are a few shows like The Voice. I don't know if American Idol's still on or not, but that was, it was a multi-camera show, and sometimes it was live. Any of the award shows, the Academy Awards, the Country Music Awards, all those are live multi shows to some extent. The late night shows. So I would say watch and learn and see why they cut to the wide shots when they do, why they go to the close-ups when they do. What's one of the things I've noticed too when watching, not to criticize too much, but when I watch religious broadcasting, a lot of times if there is a close-up of the pastor or even head to toe, you don't see any audience. So you really don't know. There's one church in particular that for years, I never knew where the relation was from where the pulpit was, where the pastor stood and the congregation. I never saw that shot.
Yeah.
And it bothered me. Like, I don't know where is this guy in another room that's speaking, or is he in the same room? So,
that's good.
Think about those things. One thing I would say is watch your program on the air. That sounds so elementary, but I remember when I used to run camera for the Richard Roberts show and you were direct. I'd go home and watch the evening airing and look at my camera shots and think, oh, I see how that fits in with the bigger scheme. Even though I was just one camera, it taught me how to run my camera better. And I think as a director and a producer, it will teach you like, oh, that's way too, that lower third, I can't even read that. Or my goodness, my grandmother could read that without her glasses on in the other room. It's way too big. Yeah. Why am I doing that?
Yeah.
So I think it's invaluable to look at your own broadcast and look at it with a critical eye in a different room. Different environment.
Well, Matt Connolly taught me early on that to watch programs we respect with the sound turned off. And his point was when you leave the sound on, you get caught up in the show. But with the sound turned off, you really start focusing on the camera angles and the cutting and how often he dissolved or cut or when. And boy, that was revolutionary for me. I would watch hours and hours of TV programs that I liked, that I respected. The other thing, let me go back to that you said that I thought was interesting was the audience shots. I'm a big believer that audience shots are real marketing tools. I mean, for instance, you're great at showing wide shots, which tells the guy at home, hey, a lot of people go hear that guy. Maybe I need to listen to that guy. If that many people come, maybe I need to hear what he has to say. You're really good about showing, first of all, no empty seats. That's a cardinal rule. Never show empty seats. But also, why telegraph to people that somebody's not coming? But also the kind of audience you want the people to identify with. For instance, if I only show, old people that aren't dressed very well, that are overweight or whatever, people are going to assume that's what your church is about. If I only show white people, they're going to assume that's a church for white people. If I only show African Americans, they're going to assume that's what the church is about. Whatever you show is what they're going to assume that church is about. So I want to show that there's a diverse range of people that come here. I want to get everybody, men, women, old, young, every racial, ethnic background. I just think audience shots are such a powerful tool for letting people at home know what this church is about and who comes. That's a great selling point, I think.
I completely agree. And I think giving a variety of shots too, if you have them, if you only have 3 cameras, you don't want to cut every camera, 5 times in 1 minute. But at the same time, you want to, again, that's a part of telling the story of what the pastor is talking about.
Yeah.
And audience shots are a big part of that.
I also think audience miking is really, really important. I think most people don't realize that you mic the audience because the worst thing in the world is have the pastor crack a joke and you don't hear anything from the crowd.
You don't hear anything.
Yeah, or you don't hear people really getting behind the pastor or a prayer time or ministry time. I want to feel the electricity of the room. So I want to put multiple audience mics in the room just so people at home can have some sense of what it's like to be in that room and hear everything. I think that's just as important as what you see. And I think a lot of people make that mistake.
Because what we're doing as religious broadcasters, as church broadcasters, is we're televising a church service, a sermon. This is not a talk show, right? Because the cameras are not between the audience and the performer. The cameras are mixed in with the audience and the performer. So that's kind of a unique thing to what we do. It's not the Tonight Show. It's not the award show, because it's not all about television. It's about the experience for the people in the room and the experience of people watching. So that's a challenge, but it's, we figured it out. We've done a pretty good job of doing so.
One of the things I loved about Joel's father, Jon, was whenever he'd get emails, or back then letters, from people that, got their lives transformed because of the program, got saved, delivered in some way, a marriage put back together, he would read them to the congregation from the pulpit on Sunday. And it really made the congregation feel like, wow, this media ministry, I'm part of this. And he would always say, look, we do this because of you. We're able to do it because of you. And I'll tell you, I remember thinking I could drive a tank down the middle of the aisle of that church with a camera on it, and nobody would care, nobody would notice, because they're so supportive of the TV ministry. And I think Jon laid the groundwork for that. And I wish more pastors did that. I think if more, the common complaint, you've heard it a million times, is that, well, the people in my church don't like the TV lighting, or they don't like to have a camera in the center line, or they don't like to have this, or they don't like to see the handheld. Well, let me tell you, you get those people on board with the impact your television ministry is making, and they won't care, because they're thrilled to be a part of it. It's up to the pastor, I think, to be that cheerleader for getting people excited.
You're right. And John Osting also would point at the camera and say, you see that camera? When I talk into that camera, that's the same as filling the Astrodome 5 times or whatever it was. And the people had been to the Astrodome, they knew, oh, wow. So when the audience camera would come around them, they'd wake up their neighbor and they'd sit up and, they'd make sure they were paying attention and nodding and yes. And they were proud that their church was on television. I think that's a good point. And it does come from the top. One other thing I thought about as a media director, to connect with your pastor, is encourage them in what they did. Like, let them know that, hey, that point you made in your sermon, that was really good. I felt like that really connected. Or when you walked over to this side of the stage and you were doing this, that really looked great. And, encourage him, let him know that you're behind him, that you're with him, that you're not in the control room cracking jokes all the time, but you're actually a part of the ministry. And you're on his side.
And you're not going to be able to choose the appropriate shots unless you're paying attention to what he's saying too, I think.
That's true.
I think that's really, really good. Now, last question. How long does Joel typically preach on Sunday versus how long you edit it, how long you cut that down into a TV program?
Yeah, he tries to do the editing when he's studying, when he's creating his sermon. He wants it to be, what is it, 26 and a half minutes, 25 and a half minutes, something like that. Because he knows his greeting is going to take this long, the other stuff that he does, and then his close is going to take a certain amount. So that gives him, 25 and a half or 25 minutes of content that he needs to, and he writes it out. And he knows pretty much per page what it's going to be. And so he gets pretty close to nailing it every time.
He's a detail guy. I remember writing it out word for word. And I tell pastors generally, most pastors have no production experience. They're not that detailed. I just tell them, don't worry about it. You just do what God calls you to do, and then we'll make that work. I think that's so important. So, okay, last thing, any last thought of encouragement you'd leave with other guys doing what you do out there?
Yeah, I think that it's important for you as the media team to also hear these reports of people whose lives were touched through the broadcast, because that's something that you did, something you worked on. And I know for me, one of the great things is when I produce a piece of video, or one of the team produces a piece of video, it plays in the church and the people applaud when they should applaud. They get emotional, tear up when we tell it. That is an amazing, powerful thing that we get to do as media people in the church. And why not? That's what we're here to do. And, it's a calling. It's something that you really need to love to do, because it can get long and monotonous and boring and thankless. But when you reach those moments and you realize that you're actually helping to change people's lives, God's using you to change people's lives, it hopefully puts a different perspective on things.
I remember, I think it was the Staples Center. It may have been somewhere else, but I think it was the Staples Center. We went, you brought me backstage, and Joel was meeting and greeting people. And I tell you, you just have to stand there for 5 minutes listening to what people tell Joel when they do that. You know, he's so good about wanting to meet people in the audience and shake their hand, give them a hug. And just listening to what they tell him about what the show has meant to them, how he gave them hope in some horrible moment, you know, in their life. I'll tell you, 5 minutes of that, and you suddenly get supercharged about the power of media and what it can do for people. So thank you, Jon, for what you do. You do an amazing job. Thanks for coming on the podcast. And in the show notes, we'll have ways to get in touch and find out more about what Joel's doing on television and how to figure out what's going on there and see more of Jon, both the live stream and the television broadcast that airs around the world. So thanks so much. We appreciate you being on.
You're welcome. Thank you, Phil. Appreciate it. Always a pleasure. Always fun.
I'm so incredibly grateful for Jon. As I said, he's been a longtime friend. I've seen him grow so much as a director and a producer on television. He's done such amazingly huge events, Yankee Stadium, Staples Center. He's done all kind of stuff way beyond just the normal weekly program that they do at Joel Osteen Ministries. So I'm grateful that he would come on today. And remember, if you're interested in media ministry, this is the book you've got to get. You've just got to get this book. Maximize Your Influence, How to Make Digital Media Work for Your Church, Your Ministry, and You. Let me tell you something. You may be a television producer or an editor or a camera operator, but you may not know that much about ministry television. It's a different world out there. Plus, if you're in the ministry, particularly if you're a pastor, I really wrote this book for pastors and ministry leaders to help them understand how to use media to expand their vision, their mission. So here's the thing. If you're a church member, if you know somebody that's leading a church or leading a ministry or a nonprofit, get this book for them. Order the book for them today. It's available for a donation to our nonprofit, The Influence Lab, that helps us train and teach Christians internationally about how to use the media to share the gospel. I'd always love for you to support that, The Influence Lab, and you can find out what we're doing there. We're getting ready to go to Europe in just a month, and we're excited about taking a team and going over there and doing some teaching. So any chance you get to support the work of the Influence Lab to help people in other countries around the world understand how to learn media to share the gospel, we would be grateful for the support that you give us there at the Influence Lab. And you can get the book for a donation. We'll send you the book absolutely free, and we'd love to have you involved in that work that we're doing. Thank you. Remember, share this with people you know. If you know people in media ministry, if you know people in communications at churches, this would be a great episode for them to see. Rate us if you would. Share it. It'll help us go up in the ratings and get noticed. We really appreciate your support, and I love the fact that you're coming every week and listening to these podcasts and really helping make a difference for the gospel out there.